Hi, folks. Welcome back. And is it time for another update? On the menu today, we have COVID, hepatitis, bird flu, monkeypox, Zika, and more. I know you're so excited about the new names on the list, but we're not done with COVID yet. We're just at 15 million deaths worldwide, with about a million of them in the US. But compared to the Spanish flu, which killed off 50 million, this doesn't sound very impressive. So it looks like we still have a way to go. So, apart from the China disasters in Shanghai and Beijing, which are barely coming out of locking down tens of millions of people, COVID in the US is on the rise. There are rising infections and rising hospitalizations, which could lead to indoor masking being mandated again. And it says there are a third of Americans who live in a high risk area, which I found interesting because they're also cautioning that 100 million Americans could have COVID by the fall, which amounts to about a third of Americans. We're past the children's vaccines at this point. Now we're talking children's boosters, which have just been approved by the CDC. On the other hand, vaccine for kids under 5 is still in the works, and there seems to be quite a bit of resistance to it at this time. But don't worry, there is another concern for children, and that is hepatitis. The highest number of cases is in the UK, and other countries also have cases. The liver is the main organ affected here, and the quote unquote experts are talking about every possible cause for this except the COVID vaccine, as you might expect, because they say these children were too young to have taken the vaccine, so it's not possible. They're debating the possibility of COVID having something to do with the hepatitis, but not the COVID vax. But vaccine shedding is actually a known fact, and they shouldn't dismiss that possibility. Vaccines designed to shed are actually used to immunize flocks of animals, and they're being contemplated for humans too. There are even studies now saying that the COVID vaccine can cause autoimmune hepatitis. Here it is. It says, in a recent study published in the Journal of Hepatology, researchers reported that the COVID disease vaccination could elicit a distinct T-cell dominant immune-mediated hepatitis. Vaccination against severe acute thingy is critical to combat the COVID. Recently, several reports have surfaced indicating autoimmune hepatitis-like condition post-COVID vaccinations not observed during clinical trials. Liver injury has been observed with both vector and messenger mRNA-based vaccines with varying periods of vaccination to symptom onset. Okay? On top of that, the vaccine is precisely designed to create the disease in order to stimulate an immune response. And the disease is transmissible, so it could have been transmitted to these children, causing them hepatitis or affecting them in some other way that contributed to that hepatitis. Plus, we have new variants. Not really worth spending too much time on these because, well, it's just the same story with the new variant names. Another disease on the menu is bird flu. This has been going on for about a couple of months now, but there's no reason to panic. The experts are saying that the public health risk remains low. It just caused a few tens of millions of birds to be killed off so far in North America alone, so nothing to see here. And it rarely transmits to human. We just have one case in China, one man in Colorado, and then in Canada, it jumped from a bird to a few foxes. So that's a non-issue.
I think we have to recognize, I've always said that I think the COVID pandemic was a wake-up call. I don't believe it's the great pandemic. I believe the great pandemic is still in the future, and that's going to be a bird flu pandemic for man. It's going to have significant mortality in the 10 to 50% range. It's going to be trouble, and we should get prepared for it. I do believe that the pandemic risk is a greater risk of the national security of the United States than Korea, China, Russia, Iran. And we ought to start investing proportional to that national security risk so we're prepared.
What is causing a bit more noise right now, though, is monkeypox. I was going to say that it started with some 4 cases in the UK, but within 12 hours that I finished my notes and sat down to record them, monkeypox blew up to more than 80 cases across 15 countries, and it is sounding the alarms. It looks like monkeypox happens to gay men most often, but please don't say gay. The word is men who have sex with men. The experts are saying it is not sexually transmitted per se because it can transmit in other ways, like through broken skin, respiratory droplets, mucous membranes. Thankfully, we went through COVID, so folks now know what biosecurity is. But although we were able to dismiss COVID as some kind of flu, I'm not so sure we'll be able to easily dismiss monkeypox for just another virus. To brighten my day, my friend Angela gladly reminded me about the monkey business that happened recently in Pennsylvania in early February. So this was on February 1st, and what I have here is a copy of the article. It says a Pennsylvania woman who had contact with the monkeys, has signs of illness, but no one else reported symptoms. So what happened here is there was a truck hauling 100 monkeys from Mauritius into the United States, and it crashed in Pennsylvania. And one woman who got close to the scattered crates of monkeys on the highway has been treated for possible symptoms of illness. There were no other reports of possible illnesses, and they said that her symptoms were not known whether they were related to this kind of monkey, these macaques, which were quarantined and monitored for the disease. She was given 2 doses of rabies, antiviral medication, antibiotic. She had a runny nose, cough, and a filmy buildup and crust in her eye. She also vomited, etc. So there is this very strange coincidence of a bunch of monkeys escaping through a truck crash in Pennsylvania. And, believe what you like, but this to me is really, really suspect. Clearly, there's something going on here, but I seriously wonder why they would pull off such a circus and leave so much writing on the wall. I will leave more links in the description box from Angela's collection of the usually very quoted articles. I don't have a good feeling, to say the least, and I can't stop thinking about the Deagle numbers, which I'll hopefully get to soon. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. All good, but we're not done. It's not only monkeypox that can be sexually transmitted, but the Zika virus can too.
Prolonged period of time. And of course, there still are more distant more distant infections. Those don't seem to be the majority, but that certainly can happen. When we talk about people getting this infection through sexual contact, what's really unknown is, was that just because of close and direct contact with a lesion, or was it actually sexually transmitted? Before we completely discard the sexual transmission, I think it's fair to acknowledge that, Ebola virus recently was found to be transmitted through semen. The Zika virus as well was found to be transmitted through sexual means as well. So I think it's fair to keep an open mind on that mode of transmission, but it's based on what we know. Close proximity is the main mode of transmission.
Recently, this masterpiece came out of the blue. Zika originally comes through mosquitoes, and it affects babies through their mothers who got infected during pregnancy. Now, they're worried it could mutate and create new variants. But don't worry, there is good news. Several billion genetically modified mosquitoes will be released in Florida, California, and Brazil, and probably other countries too, to save us from Zika and other diseases. I hear you. I'm very excited too. To top it off, there is a major increase in syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases, which apparently happened during the COVID lockdowns. But I find that a bit strange because population grew at its slowest during the pandemic lockdowns, and there were frequent reports of people not having as much sex. I guess pent-up demand caught up as the restrictions started to loosen. And you might remember that a short while back, they said the AIDS virus mutated. Finally, after 40 years. Very different from COVID, which mutates every other day, right? I've noticed that there is a serious increase in degeneracy all over as well, which I'll have more to say about in a later video. With COVID, I initially thought they might have a rapid but still gradual approach to thinning the flock, but right now I think it's possible they could be setting the stage for something a bit more catastrophic.